Hey guys, welcome to my first drive video on Porsche's brand new entry-level Taycan. Today is a huge milestone for me because this is an official UK press car, and I wouldn't have got my hands on this without you guys and girls showing me the support that you have over the past 6 or 7 years. I'm over the moon and I can't wait to do more with Porsche UK. About 6 months ago, I actually managed to get my hands on my good friend Tom's Taycan 4S. There's a link to that video up here, and I'll put one in the description as well. I absolutely love my time with that car. I was quite blown away by how well it drove and just the overall package. It really was the first sports EV I'd driven that didn't leave me feeling cold. The only issue with Tom's car is that it started at £83,000 and his one, as optioned, was close to £110,000, so hardly affordable to the average person. This new entry-level Taycan, or Taycan rear-wheel drive as people are calling it, starts at just over £70,000 here in the UK. Although this being a press car and a German press car, it does have a lot of options thrown at it. But we're going to try and focus on this as a base spec car. We're going to talk about how it drives and how it feels and what it retains compared to its more expensive brothers and sisters, the 4S, the Turbo and the Turbo S. There are a couple of styling tweaks that separate this base spec Taycan from its more expensive siblings, including the front splitter, which is black on this and body colour on those cars, and the same when you get around to the rear diffuser. But perhaps the biggest giveaway on this car is the base spec wheels, which I'm really not the biggest fan of. But there are about 7 other wheel options on the Porsche configurator, including the gorgeous Mission E wheels, but I think they're about £4,000 as an individual option. Right, let's jump inside, because if you think the exterior of this car is striking, you wait until you get inside. It's absolutely drop dead gorgeous. I need to remember this is a left-hand drive car, obviously being on German plates. When you unlock it, the door handles actually come out to meet you, which is really cool. The first time you get in a Taycan, you might be surprised at the small door aperture for the front seats, because the B-pillar itself is actually sitting quite far forward. So getting in for someone of my height in this big jacket is probably not the easiest thing. So I'm going to take my jacket off and I'll meet you in there. Once you're inside, I mean, what a place to sit. I absolutely love it in here. The dashboard, the way it's designed, it's just so stylish and clean and elegant. I love the floating instrument binnacle that sits behind potentially the best steering wheel in the world, that has a lovely thin rim in it. It's a nice small wheel as well, just like the wheel you'd find in a Porsche GT car. It just adds so much to this car. Driving position, it's a Porsche, spot on, really is amazing. I can't fault the aesthetics of this interior. I think the way it looks, aside from the slight difficulty getting in, you can actually see it here, this B-pillar, the way it sits in front of the seat. But once you're inside, it's just gorgeous. This car doesn't have the optional panoramic roof. Just feels fantastic in here. It's lovely, really, really nice. Can you tell that I like the interior of a Taycan? You probably can. And as with many of these ultra-modern touchscreen style interiors, unfortunately you tend to get a lot of grubby fingerprints. I've only had this car for about an hour and you can see plenty of mine around there. And using simple things like the climate control can be tricky, especially to begin with. You tend to have to take your eyes off the road to look down at what you're doing on this screen. But the flip side of that is you get such a beautifully clean looking interior. Things like moving the vents around, well, they're not mechanical in the Taycan. You actually have to go into a menu and control it here with the computer. A little bit unnecessary maybe, but very cool and definitely something you can show your passengers or talk to your mates about. This Taycan rear wheel drive comes with 2 battery options. The base spec car comes with a 79 kilowatt hour battery, produces 326 horsepower or 408 horsepower with the overboost function. And then you can opt for the Performance Battery Plus option, which is about a £4,000 option. I think it's going to be very popular. And that gives you a 93 kilowatt hour battery that produces 380 horsepower or 476 horsepower with the overboost function. Perhaps the most important figures for those 2 battery options is their claimed range. The base spec battery gives you a claimed 268 miles, but the Battery Plus gives you a claim range of 301 miles. And let's face it, people with EVs, their biggest gripe is their range, and you're always going to want as many miles as possible. This has actually got the Battery Plus, so it has the extended range. Ironically, even though they both produce different power and torque figures, both battery options give you a quoted or claimed 0 to 62 figure of just 5.4 seconds, and we'll be putting that to a test a little bit later. I only picked this car up a couple of hours ago and it goes back tomorrow afternoon, so what I plan to do now is switch these cameras off, go and enjoy myself in it, spend some time in this car, learn it, understand it, switch the cameras back on tomorrow before it goes back, and give you my driving impressions and my overall verdict of the base spec Taycan. Hey guys, you join me almost exactly 24 hours later. I feel like I know this car a lot better now. I've actually covered almost 200 miles in it. Yesterday we talked about this car having a list base price of just over £70,000. I believe it's actually £70,600. But as with every Porsche, it has a rather extensive options list. In fact, this particular car retails at just under 92 grand, so you're looking at a modest £21,000 worth of options. I say modest because you can spend a lot more on the options. In fact, Matt Watson had one of these base Taycans recently, and that particular car had around £40,000 worth of options on it, which is an awful lot of money when the base car is 70 grand. So I thought what I would do is point out the options that I believe are the must-have options on a car like this, because you're never going to buy one at 70 grand and walk out the showroom. You're not going to buy a base car. I wouldn't suggest doing that. I would suggest putting aside at least £10,000 for options, and if we're financing cars, it's obviously not going to be 10 grand straight out of your pocket. It's going to be a monthly figure, but you have to do that. So think of the base spec Taycan as an 80 grand car, not a 70 grand car, because there are some absolute must-haves. The first one, and the most expensive one, is the Performance Battery Plus. We talked briefly about that yesterday. It gives you a bigger range and it gives you more power and torque. It's £4,000, but honestly, ownership of an EV is all about range, and buying that range at the start, you can't add it on later, is probably the most important thing you'll do when buying a Taycan. So there's 4 grand. The next must-have option, as far as I'm concerned, is some 20-inch optional wheels. I really don't think these ones do this car any favors, because it's such a good looking car, and I just think that they just look a bit average for such a extreme and gorgeous looking exterior. They really let it down. So a good set of 20-inch turbo alloys are going to set you back about 1,500 quid. The next must-have option is the adaptive air suspension. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but yeah, it's 1,500 quid, and it's probably the best 1,500 quid you could spend on the Taycan. Something that sits nicely alongside that is the rear axle steering, or 4-wheel steering. Again, that's about 1,500 quid, and honestly makes this car feel very nimble at slower speeds. And because it's such a wide car and about 5 meters long, having that rear axle steering just means you can turn around in really tight spaces. It's easier to park. And then you've obviously got all the handling characteristics as well. It just makes the car feel shorter in wheelbase when you're pushing through corners, and makes the car just feel lighter in general. Another must-have option is the parking assist with surround view. This car doesn't actually have the surround view, it has a rear camera, but because there's so many blind spots around here, and it is a big car as we just talked about, you really do need that surround view to help you out. Obviously this is a left-hand drive German press car, and it's taken me 24 hours to get used to just how big it is, and especially where the right front corner is on this car, making sure I'm not going to curb those alloys. But yeah, the surround view and the park assist would definitely be a welcome option on this particular car. And the last fairly must-have option, I say fairly, if you've got kids or you're going to have regular passengers in the back, then I would definitely go for the panoramic glass fixed sunroof. So it's just a big panel of glass up there, and it just injects a lot of light into this cabin, especially if you're going to go with the standard black leather. It's lovely in here, as we talked about, beautiful cabin, but you just want a little bit more light in here, especially if you're sitting in the back. It gets a bit claustrophobic. So yeah, glass panoramic fixed sunroof, I think that's what it's called. This model with the Performance Battery Plus has a claimed range of 301 miles. I found that figure to be closer to around 240 miles in the time I've had it, but it has been 3 to 4 degrees outside. I've had the windscreen wipers on a lot, the headlights have been on last night, so far from ideal conditions to maximize your range in your EV. And I really think that when the summer comes on a nice day, this should achieve very close to 300 miles, which I think is a good enough figure to make an EV an achievable or realistic vehicle to use. Before driving this car, I was slightly concerned about its performance. Although on paper 0 to 62 miles an hour in 5.4 seconds sounds quick, it has a top speed of just over 150 miles an hour as well. But compared to, let's say, the Turbo or the Turbo S, it doesn't look anywhere near as fast, and I thought I'd get in here and maybe feel a little bit underwhelmed. But when you whack it into Sport Plus and you get that sort of robotized sound through the cabin, which I actually really like, it sounds like you're driving a spaceship, and when you plant your foot on the floor for the first time, you very quickly realize that this is not lacking in any beans. Like, it's seriously fast. It doesn't feel too much slower than the 4S of Tom's, and that also had the Performance Battery Plus in it. His car had a claimed 0 to 62 figure of 3.8 seconds, so it is a fair chunk quicker, and I'm sure a lot of that has to do with its traction advantage off the line, because this has just got rear wheel drive. In fact, earlier on I tested this car's 0 to 62 time with my Racebox GPS, so let's go and check that out and see what I achieved. Okay, launch control in the base spec Taycan. Porsche claim it will do the 0 to 62 sprint in just 5.4 seconds. It's very greasy outside. My Racebox is ready. Left foot is hard down on the brake. Right foot on the accelerator. Launch control activated. Here we go. Oh, I can feel it scrabbling for grip, but wow, once it gets to 30, 5.31 seconds in very slippery conditions. That's massively impressive. It's not as quick as the 4S, obviously. I think I timed that at 3.8 seconds, but still, that's really, really impressive and surely fast enough. I'm sure you'll agree that's really impressive. 5.3 seconds in a car that's 5 meters long and 2.1 tons. This is a base model Taycan. I know it has the upgraded battery, but even without that battery, Porsche claimed that it would do the same acceleration figures, which is just incredible. So in terms of performance, is this lacking any? Yes, it is, compared to its bigger brothers, who are just ridiculous in terms of acceleration performance. But in reality, in isolation, this car is not lacking any straight line performance whatsoever. Let's knock it out of Sport Plus and back into normal. I actually have a drive mode down here with 5 different settings. Range, which supposedly gives you a slightly longer range by backing off the throttle inputs a bit, just like normal combustion engine car, I guess. Then normal, which is the default mode, which I've kind of spent most of my time in. That obviously also means that the adaptive suspension that this car has fitted is in its softest setting. And ride quality, I mean, I just can't begin to tell you. I will tell you in a second. The next one is sports, stiffens everything up a little bit. I think the steering maybe gets a bit heavier. I can definitely feel the dampers are a bit heavier, and the throttle response is a bit more aggressive. And then you put it into Sport Plus and you've got that sound that we've talked about already, which I really like. Maybe that's just the big child in me, but again, stiffer chassis. I can really feel the road now. The steering again might have got a little bit heavier, but not overly heavy, and the throttle response is just like, it's just unbelievable. It's instant because it's electric. And then you've got individual, where you can obviously set that up to have as an individual setting and have all of your favorite drive modes in there if you like. Let's just talk about the ride, because the ride is exceptional. I remember when I tried Tom's car, I think his one has the 21-inch optional wheels with hardly any tyres, and I couldn't believe how good the ride quality was on that car. This particular car obviously has fairly standard wheels. I think they're 19-inch, and in fact the front tyres are 55 profile. I haven't seen a 55 profile tyre on a car for about 15 years. So the tyres are also helping the adaptive suspension, and what you end up getting is genuinely one of the best ride qualities ever. In fact, it's just so nice in here. We're sitting at 50 miles an hour. This is quite a coarse road. I've been down here in my M2 and you get a lot of tyre roar, etc. But in this car, you get no wind noise because it has a coefficient of 0.22, which I think is the lowest I've ever seen in any car. It also has no tyre roar whatsoever because the tyres aren't particularly massive. The front's a 225 section, but also it's so well insulated because it has to be. It's an EV. There's no engine sounds to drown out everything else. So it's just so pleasant in here. Really comfortable ride and just really relaxing. I just need to put on classical FM and away I go. I could sit in here for hours and hours, and well, no longer than that because I'll have to charge it, but you get what I'm saying. I've put it back into Sport Plus so we can talk about its handling and driving dynamics. I haven't driven the 4S for about 6 months now, so it's really difficult for me to compare back to back, if you like, but this definitely feels like it has more steering feel. It has a lot less weight over the front axle especially, and the tyres are quite a bit thinner. Tom's car with the 21-inch wheels, his front tyres were 265 section, these are 225 sections, so you would expect to get a bit more of that feel back, but I was worried that it wouldn't have that bite that Tom's car did. I thought it would maybe feel a little bit sloppy as a result of those old school tyres again on the front, but actually when you're in Sport Plus and the chassis stiffen up, it just feels incredible. When you turn in, it just goes where you want it to go. It's very dart-like. You do feel a little bit of roll. This has PASM as well, but only a natural amount of roll. It doesn't feel as heavy as it is, and I know manufacturers are masking car weights so well at the moment, especially SUVs, but this feels really, really good, and it definitely feels sporty when you want it to feel sporty. And when you combine that with the straight line pace, which we talked about earlier on, you can have a lot of fun in this car. This also has a 2-speed gearbox, just like the more expensive Taycans, and you can sometimes hear it change gear when you're pulling out of a service station onto a motorway or whatever. But what that gives you and what that means is you're getting all of that available energy and power more of the time, instead of just in the one gear where some of the Teslas run out of puff once you get up to higher speeds. This car, it has that second gear, so when you get to about 50-60 miles an hour, it changes into second and it gives you that extra performance up high. That also means that the car is going to be more efficient on the motorway than smaller electric cars that tend to use a lot of energy when they're at 70 or 80 miles an hour. I'm very fortunate that I've had the chance to drive a lot of the available EVs in today's market, and I have to say that this is the most compelling package yet. If I had 80 odd thousand pounds to spend on an EV, I'd be getting one of these. But until I'm forced into buying an EV, I'm still going to be sticking with my combustion engine cars. I'm a petrol head through and through. I love the smell of fuel. I love the sound of a combustion engine, but more importantly than any of that is the infrastructure and charging network. Although it's improved massively even in the past 6 months here in the UK, it's still not perfect when you've got a car that's got around 250 mile range. I found a really good charging place earlier on, and in fact managed to charge about half a tank, which was about 120 miles, in about 25 minutes. So God knows what sort of charging rate that was, but it wasn't horrific. But still, to do that in my combustion engine car, it would take me about 3 minutes, and that still puts me off because I love doing long road trips, etc, etc. But if you need an EV in your life, if you're buying one for company car tax purposes or whatever, have a look at the Taycan, because genuinely these cars are just lovely. I'm really going to miss this, and if I won the lottery tomorrow, I'll definitely have a Taycan in my collection, although it'd probably be the Turbo S, just because power. Guys, thanks so much for watching this video. As I said at the start, if you want to watch more content on a Taycan, check out my 4S video. There'll be a link in the description below. I go over Tom's car in far more detail, jumping in the back, showing you the practicalities, etc. So check that video out when you have time. I can't believe that I'm sitting in a Porsche press car. I'm really over the moon. I hope you think that I've been very honest, which I have. I'm not going to remove any of my honesty or suck up to manufacturers just so that they can give me cars, because I don't think that's true or right for anyone, especially you lot. So yeah, really excited to hopefully bring you more Porsche content in the not too distant future. But until then, take it easy, thanks for watching, and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this. Cheers. Guys, I thought I'd just quickly show you an augmented reality app that Porsche gave me. They gave me this little gimbal to play with and this iPhone 12. I can screen record, but I haven't spent enough time with it, so I'm just going to literally show you guys on the camera what it's all about. So let's bring the car into shot, and let's just focus this. So as you can see, there's a superimposed Taycan on the screen there. Get rid of that. But I can run through a number of technical features on this app. So all I've told the app is that that particular car is a Taycan rear-wheel drive, but it will do the rest. So let's have a look at technical parts. It will now show me basically the underpinnings, the chassis of this car. So there you go, let's pull the chassis away. Look at that. I just find that fascinating, and obviously there's lots of detail on here which I don't have time to go through at the moment, but really interesting, especially for something like the Taycan. It's a futuristic car, and this is a futuristic app. So we're now looking at the aerodynamics, so you can see how the airflow goes over the car. Again, I just think that's awesome, amazing. And then we've got charging here, so actually superimposes a charging building behind the car in a second. I think it's on this particular section. Wait for it. Here we go. Look at that. I mean, that's just bizarre, isn't it? So that's obviously your home charger, and then you've got the other various charging points. That looks like one at a Porsche Center, and then that looks like an Ionity one. Really cool little app, I'm sure you agree, and I just thought I'd share that little bit at the end. Thanks for watching, and see you at the next one.